Father abandoned me for his new family. When his wife stole his money, he begged for help. I left him. My name is Ryan, I'm 26, and my father is at the top of the list of people you shouldn't trust with a penny. You know, I used to think he was the epitome of strength. Tall, with an unwavering stare, and a confidence that could scare a lion. He had this way of walking into a room and owning it without uttering a word. People respected him, or maybe they feared him. To me, it was one and the same. But all that sense of invincibility, the almost mythic image I had of him, went up in smoke the moment Amanda entered his life. A woman who was like a walking ad for how to be flashy and self-absorbed. She didn't just come in, she crashed in, sweeping away anyone who didn't shine as brightly as her lipstick. She was all curves, perfume, and an attitude that screamed she was above the mundane world we inhabited. The house, once a haven of quiet strength, turned into a set piece for her drama. I'd walk into a room and find her rearranging things, leaving her mark everywhere. From the extravagant throw pillows she insisted on buying to the bottles of imported wine that replaced my father's simple whiskey. At first, I thought it was just a phase, some passing infatuation. Adults lose their minds sometimes, right? A midlife crisis disguised in red heels and an endless wardrobe. But no. Amanda, with her sharp smile and habit of touching everything in the house as if marking territory, turned my life into a backdrop for their endless parade of drama. My attempts to get my father's attention, to bring back the moments when he'd sit with me and talk about life or share stories of his youth, were met with a cold, "Not now, Ryan," as if I was just some background noise, an extra in a movie where she had taken over as the lead actress. The days bled into each other, each one filled with Amanda's laughter that never quite reached her eyes, and my father's silences that grew heavier. It felt like the walls of the house started to echo her name, suffocating any trace of the home I once knew. The man who used to pick me up on his shoulders and tell me that one day the world would be mine now barely looked at me. I was invisible, a shadow that drifted from room to room, learning how to be small, how to not take up space. Then came that day, my 18th birthday, a milestone that should have been marked with cake, cheers, and maybe a poorly sung happy birthday. But there was no celebration, just a cold wind that cut across my face as I stood outside, staring at the only home I had ever known. My father, standing in the doorway, his face carved from stone, pushed me out with a look that said everything without saying anything at all. His eyes showed nothing but fatigue and indifference, as if he had been waiting for this moment and couldn't be bothered with the sentiment of it. "You've got your own life now, kid. Time to grow up," he said, the words cutting into me and sticking like thorns. And there I was, on the front step with nothing but a backpack slung over my shoulder and a feeling deep in my chest that I'd been replaced by a newer, shinier version of what a family was supposed to be. I watched his figure disappear behind the closing door, that final sound marking the end of everything familiar. I wanted to scream, to pound on that door until my fists were raw, to yell at him to snap out of whatever spell he was under. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around and walked away, each step making the churning inside me worse. Love, resentment, anger, all mixing into a cocktail I never asked for and had no idea how to handle. That night, under the indifferent sky, I stood on the edge of what I used to know and stared out into the unknown, the realization sinking in that I was truly alone, and in that loneliness, a seed of something new began to take root, something that would take years to grow into the man I'd become, for better or worse. The first few days after being kicked out were a real-life survival test. You know those movie scenes where the hero wanders the city with a face full of suffering, set to melancholy music? Well, my version had the background noise of street vendors yelling and police sirens wailing. I slept wherever I could, under bridges, in alleys, between trash bins. Food? Let's just say I mastered the art of finding delicacies at closed food stands. A week into this adventure, I was ready to embrace the life of a street philosopher, rambling about the meaning of life with a cardboard sign in hand. But when my desperation peaked, fate threw me a bone. I ran into Nick, a childhood friend with whom I used to race bikes and have spit contests. He'd grown up a lot, short hair, arms covered in engine grease, but that familiar sly grin was still there. "Dude, what happened to you?" he asked, taking in my ragged clothes and tired eyes. I just shrugged and muttered, "Family stuff, man." Nick was the kind of guy with a big heart and an even bigger mouth. He pulled me into his garage, where the smell of oil and gasoline felt like a balm for the soul. Within a day, I was tightening bolts and washing cars. It wasn't my dream job, but damn, it was real. It was mine. I managed to secure a bed in a hostel where the walls were as thin as paper and the neighbors loved late-night karaoke battles. But it beat sleeping on cold asphalt. During the day, I worked, scrubbing away remnants of my old life, and at night, I studied, trying to cram something other than obsessive thoughts of Tom and Amanda into my head. They had become like an old movie you hate, but can't stop thinking about. Life was slowly taking shape. I could even afford little pleasures, a $1 coffee from a machine and a burger that wasn't moldy. But the past, like a persistent neighbor, kept knocking. Memories of the day I became unwanted were like a splinter. Sometimes I'd catch myself clenching my fists until my knuckles turned white, thinking about how one dazzling smile turned my father into a stranger. Years passed, and I finally became the guy who solved his own problems, not waiting for someone else to do it for him. My auto shop was small but proud, just like me. Customers knew me as the guy who could keep their cars running for at least a few more years. Ryan, the wrench wizard, would have sounded corny, but it was true. Then one day, while I was lifting a beat-up car on the jack, I heard the chime of the front door. I didn't even turn around. Mornings were too busy to greet every customer. But then a voice from the past hit me like an electric shock. "Hey, son!" I froze. That voice, once cold as ice, now trembled with exhaustion. Slowly, I turned, and there stood Tom, the man who was once my whole world, but then became a stranger with a superiority complex. But now he didn't look powerful. No, this Tom was pale, thin, and so tired his eyes seemed to plead for mercy. Before I could say anything, he started spilling a tearful monologue. "Amanda's gone. She took everything. I have nothing. Not even a roof over my head." Dude, if only you could have seen my face in that moment. It screamed, "Seriously? For real?" I fought the urge to laugh in his face. Amanda, the same woman he sacrificed everything for, including me. Oh, the irony. But then, strangely, I felt a twinge of pity. I knew what it was like to lose everything. The difference was, for me, it was forced. For him, it was voluntary. Tom's eyes begged, "Ryan, I need your help. You're the only one who can—" He didn't finish, and I was already running through scenarios in my head, each more absurd than the last. Did he really think I'd drop everything and be his savior? That was ambitious, to say the least. Inside me, a battle raged. Help him and show him I've grown, or leave him to his own mess to finally understand what it feels like to be discarded. That night, I tossed and turned on my tiny bed, staring at the ceiling as if it held the answers to all my questions. Why did he come back now? After everything he did, why was my anger burning brighter than a welding torch? Memories tore at me. Tom teaching me how to fix engines, showing me how easy it was to replace a timing belt, laughing as we drank sodas straight from the bottle and argued about which baseball team would lose. These scenes were sweet, almost like childhood nostalgia, but now they stung like lemon juice on an open wound. My mind taunted me. "Dude, he didn't even check if you were alive after he threw you out. He forgot you as fast as he started his perfect new chapter." My anger and disappointment intertwined, playing their own suspenseful movie score in my head. But damn, I wasn't the type to walk away from a challenge. In the morning, as light crept through the workshop's dirty windows, I finally made up my mind. I'd help him, but on my terms. Not because I wanted to be a hero, but because I had pride, and it demanded that I show him who held the cards now. Tom looked like a zombie too worn out to audition for an apocalypse show. Hungry, exhausted, with eyes that whispered, "Save me." I let him into the garage, cluttered with half-disassembled engines, and pointed to an old but sturdy couch in the corner. "You can stay here," I said, emphasizing each word. "But let's get one thing straight. I'm not your savior, and I'm definitely not the son who'll jump at your every request. You want to prove you're worth anything? Start small. Learn to make coffee, and don't get in my way." He nodded, avoiding my gaze. There was a flicker of gratitude in his eyes, but I'd already turned away. This wasn't an act of kindness, it was a test. Tom accepted my help with a look that screamed divine intervention. Humility? Sure, it was there, as sincere as Black Friday sale signs. But did that mask last? Of course not. Within a few weeks, I noticed familiar tricks reappearing in my garage. It started with small things. A customer picking up their car would suddenly be informed that a needed new part had been added, costing hundreds of dollars, something only Tom knew about. At first I thought it was a mistake, but when it happened again and again, I realized the master manipulator was back. It didn't take long to find proof. Tom was too confident, forgetting about the cameras I installed a couple of years back after a few bad incidents. So much for the modern-day con artist. I called him in for a talk. Sitting behind my desk, arms crossed, I stared at him like he'd already lost a game of chess that hadn't even started. "Tom, did you really think I wouldn't notice? You're pulling your old tricks again," I said, my voice cold as a soda can after a long workday. He froze, then his eyes lit up with that familiar fire I'd hated since I was a kid. "How dare you talk to me like that?" he snapped, voice rising, hands trembling with anger. "You never learned to forgive, Ryan. You think that makes you strong? No. It makes you weak, just like I was." Low blow. My fists clenched instinctively, thoughts racing faster than I could keep up. Did he seriously think he could paint me as the villain? Like I was the one who spent years scheming and threw my own son out? "Dude, do you really think you can fool me again?" I said through gritted teeth, holding back from shouting. "You put yourself in this corner, and now I'm here to make sure you don't get out so easily." My patience snapped like an old exhaust pipe. Tom had crossed the line, leaving no room for doubt or second chances. I kicked him out of the garage without ceremony, leaving him in debt as promised. If you could have seen his face, a mix of rage and shock, like someone had just told him his prized sports car was sold for a couple of hot dogs. I thought that was the end of this ridiculous drama. But Tom came back, with threats. He stood at the doorway of my shop, face twisted with fury, eyes burning with a wild look. "You owe me everything, Ryan," he shouted, as if it were a magic spell that would make me drop to my knees and beg for forgiveness. I couldn't help but smirk. "Dude, are you serious? Do you really believe in your own stories?" Did I know this wouldn't end without a serious showdown? Absolutely. But instead of fear, I felt a confidence I hadn't known in years. The bitterness that had simmered for so long turned into a cold, calculated resolve. I took action. You know how in movies they say game over? Well, I had my own game just started. I gathered every piece of evidence of his schemes, from camera footage to documents proving his masterpieces of fraud. Armed with this, I contacted his old creditors, people who had been looking for him like a lost TV remote. When Tom realized the walls were closing in, panic set in. He disappeared faster than he could say, "It's a misunderstanding!" My shop regained its peace, and his reputation crumbled like a house of cards. Rumors spread, and Tom was reduced to nothing more than a shadow of the past, the same shadow that once kicked me to the curb. After that drama, life finally settled down. The shop returned to smelling like gasoline instead of cheap soap opera drama. The shadow of the past? Gone. It stopped hovering over me like a storm cloud before the rain. I could breathe freely again, every new day a breath of fresh air, mixed with exhaust, of course, but who notices that? To top it off, my business boomed. Word about Ryan's Got It Made spread faster than gossip at a party. Customers came in droves, and I managed to build connections I couldn't have dreamed of a few years ago. People who once thought I was just the guy who got abandoned now looked at me with respect, some even with envy. When my bank account started to grow, I opened a second shop in another neighborhood. A king's move, if you catch my drift. And Tom? Tom never tried to step back into my life, and that was a relief. Rumors told me he was now moving from town to town, trying to find a place where his past wouldn't catch up to him, like an ignored rent bill. I'd hear whispers that he worked on construction sites or sold hot dogs at fairs. Dude, from king of drama to king of hot dogs, that's a fall, Nick once joked, and I couldn't help but laugh. The thought of Tom, once so proud and arrogant, now living a humble life, brought a strange sense of satisfaction. I didn't wish him harm, but justice felt good. Life moved on, and I built my empire on the ashes of an old, burned-out chapter. The shadow of the past no longer loomed over me. It stayed where it belonged, in forgotten memories and the distant past. Sometimes at night, when the city fell silent and the only sounds were distant sirens and the ticking of an old wall clock, I'd wonder, what if Tom had chosen family over his quest for luxury? I'd imagine him one day sitting down, pouring us cups of coffee and saying, "You know, son, real value isn't in a new car or the next shiny toy." But of course, those are the kinds of fantasies you keep in your head just to laugh at. These thoughts didn't weigh on me like they used to. There was no sharp pain that used to come with memories of what my childhood could have been. Now, it was more like a faint sting, yeah, that happened kind of feeling. I built my life step by step, bolt by bolt, without his support or influence. And you know what? That feeling, knowing you did it all yourself, is priceless. It's not measured in money or recognition. It's deeper, like an internal currency of self-respect. Revenge? It didn't give me back what I missed out on as a kid. It didn't bring me the father I wanted, nor did it change my past. But damn, it gave me peace. Peace from knowing I wasn't tied to his mistakes anymore. I learned to be strong not because of his support, but despite his absence. It was a strength that came from fighting, from busted knuckles fixing engines, from sleepless nights and days when the only thing keeping me going was anger and determination. So yeah, Tom could have made different choices. But me? I chose to move forward.